Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and introduce you to our first speaker of the day. This is Dr. Sandra Kaufmann. She's here. Yeah. I'm gonna tell you a little bit about her. For the last 5 years, she was the chief of pediatric anesthesia at the Joe DiMaggio Children's Hospital. Most recently, she was recognized as Best in Medicine by the American Health Council. Her avid interest in the science of anti-aging began many years ago as an intense hobby. Utilizing her knowledge in cell biology, human pharmacology, and physiology, this hobby has now become a main focus. The project represents years of non-clinical research leading to the first ever comprehensive theory of aging. And we're talking about the Kaufmann Project.
Protocol.
The Kaufmann Protocol, which she's going to talk to you about. But today, she's going to focus on the circadian clock. Please help me welcome Dr. Kaufmann.
Few preliminary statements. Number one, thank you guys. I love this place. You guys are amazing, most enthusiastic crowd I have ever met in my life. Amazing, amazing, amazing. Secondly, I tried to figure out what it was I was going to come and talk to you guys about. You are so knowledgeable. You are like beyond knowledgeable. So I'm like, I can't give a standard speech. I need to create something new and kind of cool. So what I've created for you guys, it's the first time I've ever given it, so it might be a little lumpy and bumpy in places, but so just bear with me, you're kind of a trial crowd. So A, this is for you. But the other reason I did it, or two other reasons. Number one, I keep going to these longevity conferences, and they're these sleep experts, and they keep saying, oh, turn the lights off before you go to bed, don't look at your computers, do this, do that, do the other, and they're concentrating on what I think is entirely the wrong things. Because sleep is molecular science. And you can do all the things that you want, but if you don't, clean up your molecular biology of sleeping, it's not going to happen, right? So that's what we're going to talk about today. And lastly, honestly, has anyone heard a speech about true molecular biology of circadian clocks? Anyone? I did a lot of digging to get this stuff, so hopefully this is new information. If it's not, if there's anybody out there that knows more than me, be my guest. But I tried to create something kind of new and innovative. Okay. So, back up. So, circadian clock, more than just a good night's sleep. I know that we all think about sleep as sleep, and we know it's good for us and blah, 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 blah. I would argue, however, that the sleep itself is not what's important, but it's the byproduct of the sleep that's important. It's what happens beyond the sleep, and sleep is just like, okay, that's nice, nice. But the molecules that force you to sleep are the molecules that are important for every other aspect of cell biology. And that's going to be the take-home message. So more than a good night's sleep. All right, we're going to start at the basics. What is the circadian clock? I love the word circadian. It's a great word. If you take it apart, circa means near or around, right? Circadian, DN means a day. So it means something that happens around the day, which is pretty sort of generic, but that's a great word. And we've known that you have circadian rhythms, since the dawn of humanity, right? We go to sleep when it's dark, we wake up when the sun comes up. But it wasn't until 1971 that we actually knew this happened, right? Watching little flies sleep, which is amazing to me. So it took a long time to actually create the science. And it wasn't until 2017 that someone actually won a Nobel Prize identifying the idea that this is actually molecular biology. Like, we all take it for granted, but this is big science. Why? Because the circadian clock creates so many things beyond just sleeping. And here's my laundry list of stuff. And I just picked out the ones that were important. There's zillions more. So for example, you make hormones with the clock. Your blood pressure changes, your heart rate changes, the viscosity of your blood changes. That's why people tend to have strokes in the morning instead at night. Everything is timed, right? Your immune system is better certain parts of the day versus others. Obviously, your body temperature changes. You get colder before you go to bed, right? And I put sleep-wake cycles at the bottom because that's not what we're focusing on here. It's less important than all the other stuff. Why? Why does this happen? Because you have clock-controlled genes, right? And depending on the paper you read, it's somewhere between 10 to 50% of all of the genes that are controlled via circadian rhythms. That's a lot. That's almost half. That's a lot. So it controls every cellular function. And again, this is just a few things that I thought were very important. The cell cycle, it's circadian. DNA damage response, and this is actually another reason why I stumbled upon this. I was trying to figure out how to repair your DNA more effectively. And every time I looked it up, it said, see circadian rhythms. I'm like, okay, fine. So I went to look at circadian rhythms. If you don't fix all the stuff that we're going to talk about, none of this happens, right? Mitochondrial function, epigenetic modulation, it's all circadian. And we all know that during the day, you beat the pulp out of yourself. Your proteins are broken down, your muscles are breaking down, your DNA is broken down. That's catabolic. And I always picture a cat just sort of like, breaking things down. If anyone ever has trouble remembering that, I'm really good with like silly ways to think of things. And of course, at night, we fix it all. So it's the opposite. It's anabolic. What happens when these things go awry? Well, I love Dolly's dripping clock, right? That sort of says it all. If your clock doesn't work, everything just goes, doesn't work very well. So what falls apart? Well, the worst thing that could possibly happen, lifespan reduction, which is why this is really important to you guys, right? For those of you who don't want to die at all, you gotta fix this. This is crucial, right? This is key. Additionally, if you're not sleeping, cancer risk, right? Not sleeping is a 2A cancer risk at the same category as UV radiation. Did you know that? So people that work the night shift and have screwed up hours, they get cancer, they get cardiovascular disease, they get osteoporosis, they're a high risk for fracture. So it's not the sleeping part though, but it's everything else. It's because you're not turning on your clock-controlled genes. Okay, so how does this work? We're going to start at the basics, right? It starts with something called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. Sits in your head, right? Light comes in, hits your retina, sends messages back to your brain, and it creates the cycles or the pattern, okay? But it turns out that not only does the cells in your suprachiasmatic nucleus, so I'm stripping over that word, not only is that circadian, but every cell in your body is also following circadian rhythms, but this is the master controller. This is the one that says, okay, this is going to be what we're going to do during the day, this is what we're going to do during the night. And it's called Zeitgebers. I know someone here is German, right? Who's German? Isn't there German? Yeah, thank you. I knew it. Am I saying that correctly? Zeitgebers? Yeah? Okay, good, because I was flailing with that. I know I'm going to screw it up. I'm like, there's going to be Germans there, I know this. Anyway, so these are the external stimuli that tell your master clock to sleep or not to sleep. Anyway, but these are the things that people that help you sleep tell you to control. The light, social interactions, when you eat, when you don't eat, like temperature in your room. So you can control your Zeitgebers, but that's only the input that goes to your suprachiasmatic nucleus. Okay, so that sends a message via a whole lot of different methods. There's hormones, there's nerves, there's all sorts of messages that go to every other cell in your body to tell them to be in sync. And every cell in your body, as I said, with the exception of testes and thymus, has their own intrinsic rhythms, which I think is really kind of funny that your testicles don't have rhythms, so they're ready all the time. I can just say that to you guys. I won't say that in the big message. Anyway. Okay, so these are the molecular players. And I created these goofy little cartoons. So just enjoy them, because I did this with my 16-year-old daughter. They're not perfect, but I think they sort of help us to remember what they do. So the big players are clock and BMLA1 at the top, and then we're going to talk about EBOX. That's like glob number 1. Glob number 2 is cryptochromin period. We're going to talk about that. And then we've got some accessories on the side. I know this is random symbols at the moment, but we're going to explain them all, and then it's going to make sense in the end. So the first one, this is the main orchestrator. This is BMAL1, terrible name. The B stands for brain because it was first identified in human brains. The rest is sort of gibberish. I made it look like a moon because it's kind of funny, all right? So, but this is the key orchestrator. It has the worst name, but it has the best activity. If you do not have this protein, number one, all of your cells are going to get screwed up and your circadian rhythms take a dive. Very, 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 very important. I love to put the fact that it's a helix loop helix protein on there. The next slide is going to explain why, but just know that it is one. And we know that if mice are deficient, all bad things happen. Number one, significantly reduced lifespan. They get cataracts, they get sarcopenia, all of the signs of advanced aging. We know as well, if you are a shift worker and your circadian rhythms are off, BMLA1 drops precipitously. And we also know that it goes down as you get older, right? So bad things. Its component, and this one has a way better name, is clock, okay? And obviously, when I drew the little thing, it's gonna look like a clock. The real name is impossible to pronounce. It's circadian, locomotor, octopus, cycles, kaput, which means someone in a lab spent a hell of a lot of time putting those in the right order to make it sound like something we could remember. So it's clock, right? Picture's a clock, thus it's super easy. But this was not identified until 1997. So all this is really new science, right? And again, it's the same molecular structure as the one before. And if you look at the picture, it's a helix, which is the long thing. There's a loop and then another long thing. And if you really think about it, it's a clothespin, right? And what it does is it clamps onto the DNA, and the other one actually attaches to it. So you've got two clothespins sitting on your DNA, creating really just amazing things. And I love the idea that it's a clothespin. Anyway, again, if you have deficiency, much like BMLA1, same thing sort of happens, significantly reduced lifespan, cataracts, dermatitis, all of the problems with advancing age. And if you get a mutation in this, and they love mutating clock genes for whatever reason, you see things that look like metabolic disease. So you get hyperphagia, hyperglycemia, bad lipids, metabolic disorders, et cetera, and especially sleep. So the other thing that clock does is it's an epigenetic modifier. Everyone remember epigenetics? I'm sure it's a smart crowd, everyone does. So this is a HAT. It's a histone acetyltransferase activity enzyme. What does it do? It puts acetyl groups on things. Okay? So it runs around putting acetyl groups. Historically, they thought it only did it to histones, thus the name, but it does it to histones and non-histone proteins, but it changes their activity. And one of the things that it does is it acetylates BMLA1, so that's its partner. It also acetylates a variety of other things, the most important of which is your glucocorticoid receptor. So if you don't have clock protein, not only are you not sleeping, your steroid system is all screwed up, right? So this is my point to impress upon you that it's not just sleep, it's a whole lot of other things as well. Okay, so these proteins or enzymes are made, created in the nucleus. They go to the cytoplasm, right? They get together because they like to stick together. The clock is an acetylator, so it puts a little party hat on top of BMLA1. If you look at my picture, see my little party hat with a little A on it? It's been acetylated, right? So they heterodimerize in scientific terminology, and they land on something called the E-box. The E-box is an enhancer cassette, sits in your DNA, and that controls the 40 to 50% of all the proteins that get made. So as soon as that E-box gets turned on, voila, everything is magic, okay? At the bottom of this, like see my arrow goes to clock, so if this doesn't happen, you don't sleep. With age, we've noticed that you don't have clock, you don't have BMLA1, you don't have sleep, but you don't have any of the other proteins either. Okay, so that's the top box, right? Everyone got that part? Clock, we got the moon, we got the party hat, we're all good. All right, so that makes you sleep. Below that are cryptochrome and period. Now, coming up with a little picture for cryptochrome was a bit tricky, so it just became a dollar bill. My daughter's like, well, it's cryptocurrency, duh, right? So thus it looks like a dollar bill. Period is a big dot, because it's a period. Easy to remember, right? I'm the most simplistic of humans. All right, so what do? They turn everything off. So those two are made in the nucleus. They go out to your cytoplasm. They bond together, they heterodimerize, and they turn everything off at the E-box. So two things are turning them on, goes back into a circle, and these things are turning them off. So it's a loop. Amazingly enough, that's your circadian rhythm. On, off, on, off, on, off. When any of these go awry, it doesn't happen, right? This is just to point out the fact that they're active during the day and then not active at night. And what they do is as they turn each other off, they wax and wane. So the easiest way to think about it is the picture on the right. Obviously, one's blue and one's red. You see that they're absolutely in oppositional behavior, okay? And here are my arrows, because I like simplisticness. The top goes to the bottom goes to the top, and we're in a loop, right? Now you say to yourself, well, what are these things on the sides? What are these decor, right? We've got reburb on one side, and we've got ROR alpha on the other, right? One's a plus, and one's a minus, and you're never going to guess what that means, right? One's going to make it more, and one's going to make it less. I'm not that, right? This is very basic. They are both E-box proteins, right? So when the system gets activated, right, the clock BML comes down, activates the E-box, both of these get made. And interestingly enough, they both land on the same receptor. It's the RRE receptor. But one turns it on and one turns it off. And you think, well, that's kind of dumb. But what it actually does is it increases the oscillation depth of the wave. So you can sleep a little bit, or you can sleep a lot. And that's what we want, right? So it's a very complex system. All right, so here we go, back to my silly little diagrams. We see now that RO alpha has a positive effect, right, because it's in a plus sign, feeds back to the clock system. Rev, it has a negative because it's in a little negative thing, and it feeds back. Does that make sense to everybody now? Yeah. Simple, right? Good. So this is what it looks like in the actual real diagram, sort of, in the literature. And you'll see that there are numerous other clock proteins that feed into this. And I'm not going to go through all of them, but just a few of the ones you're probably familiar with. I threw timeless on the list because no one actually knows what it does, but it's got a great name, right? So I had to include it. Sirtuins, we all know sirtuins. Turns out that sirtuin 1 and 6 are integral to all of this, and we're going to get to that in a second, but we know that sirtuins drop with age, and I'm sure all of you are on sirtuin activators. AMP kinase and mTOR, those affect this, right? And that has to do with how much energy you have to feed into the system to sleep or not to sleep. NAD is very important, as we know, and then there's a variety of other things, the cofactors, but we don't need to go into much detail. Oops, did I just do this? Okay. Sirtuin 1 and 6, what are they for those people that don't know? We have 7 mammalian sirtuins. 1, 6, and 7 live in your nucleus. 2 flits around the cell, we don't really know what it does. 3, 4, and 5 live in the mitochondria, and if you want energy, you have to upregulate number 3. But 1 and 6 are key for all of this. They're deacetylases, right? Because that's what they are, they're epigenetic modifiers, and they turn other enzymes on and off. Usually on, sometimes off. And of course, because they're sirtuins, they require NAD as a cofactor, and we all know that over the course of time, we are NAD deficient. What does 1 do? This is just where it gets like this ridiculously complex, like in and out sort of thing. So it's a deacetylator, so it deacetylates BMLA1, which is interesting, right? Because clock acetylates it. So now we've got a war going between clock and sirtuin 1. That sort of increases oscillation. It also changes the rhythms with all the PERs and the cryptos. And I didn't talk about it, but there's 2 types of PERs and 2 types of cryptos. It doesn't really matter. But what it does is it just makes the oscillations huge. The bigger the oscillations, the better you sleep, right? And we know that it's NAD dependent. I said that. And we also know we have a sirtuin deficiency over time. 6. We used to think that 6 didn't do a whole lot of anything, but 6 is huge in your DNA repair mechanism system. And this is how I got into all of this in the first place. So what does it do? It brings BMLA1 to the E-box, right? So that's crucial. If you don't have that, the whole system sort of falls apart. And it also stabilizes the negative part, HER2, right? That's the negative feedback loop. It stabilizes that. And just remember that these things do other things. It also controls all of your fatty acid and cholesterol metabolism. Sorry. All right, NAD. We know that NAD does innumerable things around the body, right? In my world, it does 4 things. It's for the electron transport chain, helps with DNA repair mechanisms, it's a sirtuin cofactor, and communicates energy levels between your nucleus and your mitochondria. In this aspect, it helps as a cofactor of your sirtuins. But this is so inbred, it's fantastic, because NAD is created in an oscillatory fashion. When you activate your E-box, you're making the enzyme, i.e. NAMPH, right, that makes NAD for your salvage pathway. So NAD is created in a circadian fashion. What's also fabulous is that the NAD then controls how this whole thing works. So it's this fantastic another layer of feedback systems, right? The half-life of NAD is also very short. And we don't think about this, right? So when you go get your NAD treatment, people go for 1 month, whatever, and you get this huge IV infusion and then nothing. Well, we can see that that's pointless because anything in a circadian feedback loop has to have a short half-life because it has to oscillate, right? So NAD has a short half-life, therefore taking a huge dose once a month does not help you, at least in this regard. You're gonna metabolize it and then poof, it's gone. So you're better off with small doses on a regular level if you're trying to like copy a standard metabolic pathway. Thank you. Does that make sense? Okay. The other interesting thing is every study on circadian rhythms is done in rodents. And rodents are nocturnal. Is anyone all right? So it's incredibly hard to find human evidence because it says mammalian evidence everywhere. And you go, is that human? Is it rat? So some of the things you have to really sort of tease out because it's backwards sometimes. So we think that NAD levels are highest in the morning in humans only because it's backwards from rats where it's not. Right? So if you're going to take your NAD every day, take it in the morning, right? Because that's when your body needs it. Okay. Sleeping Beauty, for those of you who have forgotten, right? It's not Cinderella, this is Sleeping Beauty. And this is to remind me that circadian proteins work in two different ways. Either A, they work directly, and we're gonna see, I'm gonna give you one example of how a protein involved in the system does something directly, or it does something really important indirectly by activating the E-box. So example one is B-mol. We said that this was the main orchestrator for sleep, right? But that's just one of the things it does. It controls your mitochondria. It controls all of your metabolism, your glucose, your lipids, your amino acids. B-mol controls this. DNA damage repair systems. Again, this is how I got into this in the first place. Controls bone growth. This is why if you're not sleeping, you're gonna get fractures. And it blocks fat production. So again, if you don't have B-mol and you're not sleeping, you're gonna get fat. Bad things, right? So the point being is that sleeping is one thing, but all the other things are just so unbelievably important. And we know that B-mol 1 declines with age. So the second category here is telomeres. Who here has heard of a telomere? 17,000 hands, right? So it turns out that all of the enzymes involved in telomere biology are oscillatory, right? They're all listed here. Telomerase, it's oscillatory. It's on the circadian cycle, as is TERT, as is TERA, right? So if you're not sleeping, you're not making all of these proteins. You're not making the stuff that's keeping your telomeres healthy either. And we know, at least in rodent models, that if you have a clock deficiency, your telomeres are getting shorter than they should be, right? Okay, so what really happens as you're getting older? So from a cell biology perspective, when we track this stuff, the robustness of the cycle declines, right? Big oscillatory wave that I talked about, it's not so great. The synchronization of the tissues falls apart, right? It's supposed to come from your brain to go out to the rest of your body, and that falls apart. So your pancreas is oscillating in one spot, and your kidney is doing it in another, and it sort of screws everything up. As well, as I said, the amplitude changes and it shifts, right? That's what our little waves look like. But what do we see, right? Everyone says you're getting older, you don't sleep as well, right? What do we see? People have more morningfulness, right? It used to be like a teenager sleeps until noon. When you're older, you don't. You get up at the crack of dawn. That's just, right? That is the failure of all of these chemicals. We wake up more. We can't go to sleep as well. When we do wake up, it's, the world keeps us awake and everything falls apart. And as it turns out that after the age of 40, when true age starts, you lose 30 minutes of sleep every decade, which seems like a very small thing, but as we know, is because we're all in that age bracket, it sort of creeps up on you. And all of a sudden, you're not sleeping the 12 hours that a teenager slept. You're like, 5 is good enough. But you know what? It's not. So I went back and I made a list of all of the things that decline with age. And these are like the high points. B-mol 1 goes down. Clock goes down. We know your sirtuins go down, right? NAD goes down. AMP kinase goes down. And ROR alpha goes down. Unfortunately, this is just true. But on the other side of the screen are the hacks. These are the things that increase these things. And I know for a fact that everyone in this crowd is very interested in hacking this. And you're probably on a variety of these things already. But I'm going to point out a few that you probably haven't heard of. I'm sure everyone here is on spermidine, right? Selenium is really interesting. And we're going to talk about that in a bit, but most people are selenium deficient. In terms of sirtuins, I'm sure everyone's on a sirtuin 1 activator, usually was Veritol, Pteristilbene. Who here is on the sirtuin 6 activator? So the option, yeah, you don't count in the back. So Fucodan and cyanidin are the big important ones. Fucodan is the easiest to get. It comes from a seaweed from Japan. Very important. I'm sure everyone here is on an NAD precursor or something. I just poo-poo the infusions, but you do need to NAD somehow. AMP kinase metformin is the easy one, but a million things do it. ROR alpha is the one that I bet no one here is worried about augmenting yet, right? And this is the key one. This is just so interesting. Turns out when you start taking Nobilitin, because it's my favorite of the group because I've tried them all, you just sleep significantly better. Where does Nobilitin come from? It is horribly underappreciated. If you look at my rating system, you'll see a ton of 2s. And the way my rating system works, for people that don't know or don't remember, is I do it by evidence. So if something does something in a culture or a test tube, it does a 1. If it does something in a mammal other than humans, it gets a 2. And if there's human evidence, it gets a 3 in each of the 7 tenets of aging. So you see that there's a ton of evidence in mammals in almost every aspect of this. But no one's looking at this in humans yet, so the numbers are probably lower than they should be. I think over the course of time, everyone's going to be on Nobilitin. That's my guess. So what does it do? It's an ROR agonist. And this was in the plus sign on our group. So this will increase the oscillations to make you sleep better. I also like things that have several components to them or do several things. So it's an NRF2 activator. That turns on all of your endogenous free radical scavenging capacities, your glutathione, your catalase, your superoxide dismutases, et cetera. It's an anti-inflammatory and it's an antihistamine. So like, what could get better than that? And it comes from orange peel, so people like stuff that's natural. There it is. I wouldn't necessarily recommend eating the orange peel. It's kind of crunchy, but it does come in tablets. This is kind of a cool one as well. And again, I'm just trying to show you things that maybe you haven't heard of because you guys are rather educated. Neoruscogenin, this is fantastic. People take it for hemorrhoids and varicose veins, right? Pretty bizarrely random. It also helps you grow muscle, right? Which is useful. But again, it's an ROR alpha agonist. So it's the same mechanism. It's going to help you sleep better. It's not going to put you to sleep, but it will increase the oscillation so that you sleep deeper and better, and your little Oura ring will be happy. And then the last one I've shown in here, most people are on spermidine, probably. If you haven't, maybe you should be. It's in the polyamine family. I love the names of this, is why I always include them. Who couldn't turn down something called putrescin, right? It's fantastic, right? It's putrid, it's putrescin. Spermidine and spermine, they're just different lengths of the same molecule. And they do many things. And they're, like, I tried to track down all of the feedback loops in your clock, and it's like a tangle of spaghetti. Essentially, though, polyamines are also clock proteins, so they oscillate, and then they help the oscillation. So they stimulate BMLA1, which is positive, but they also stimulate reverb, which is negative. So again, we're increasing the oscillatory rate. They also help the different molecules interact, especially the per and the crypto. Those are the two that were stuck together. Like the crypto is the square and the period is the circle. It helps them come together more readily. We know that as you get older, you have less polyamines in your body, and we know that if you give it to adult mice, they just like sleep heavily after. So it's a good thing. Selenium, I mentioned this briefly. Most people are selenium deficient. Too little selenium will kill you. Too much, way too much selenium is also bad for you. But there's a happy medium. So if you haven't had your selenium levels measured, I recommend that you do so. Depending on where you live in the world and what your diet is will sort of dictate your selenium levels. But having high to medium levels of selenium increases DNA repair rates, and it will help you sleep. And then lastly, I couldn't not put melatonin on here. It doesn't actually fit into any of this because it works centrally in the SCN. And it turns out that you have 2 melatonin receptors. There's 1 and 2. As you age, unfortunately, the receptors get downregulated, and your melatonin also gets downregulated. So giving melatonin back will help your central clock, but it doesn't do anything for the periphery. But again, this will help you go to sleep, and the other things will help you stay asleep. So when you are thinking about sleep, I want you to think of all of these things. And when you put a program together, know that the system is extremely complex and interdependent. So bumping one up may turn off the other and vice versa, right? So what you want to do is create a program where it's a little of everything. You want something to help you sleep, something to increase your BMLA1, something to help your clock, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You don't want to overdo any one because it's just going to throw the whole system cantilever. So as you create your own longevity program, and I know you guys are all on your own longevity stack, throw some things in there that will help with sleep so that you're not sort of falling prey to all the negative, horrible things I talked about. And that is it.
That was really enlightening.
Thank you.
Yeah. And
Hopefully it's new stuff. You guys are very knowledgeable.
Definitely new stuff, and then I loved how much detail you went into to explain to us where, how it happens, so that then we can supplement it better, and also the approach of a little bit of everything versus just one at a time. That was very interesting. So we're open for questions now, and that's for all of us here, and then also online. If you have any questions, let us know. But I do have a question. I've heard a lot about the differences for female versus male. Do you have any?
So I found absolutely no sex differences in the clock system. How they then play out can be different. So for example, they do affect hormone creation, right? So it's going to affect testosterone different than estrogen, but in terms of the basic aspects of the clock, it's the same for both sexes.
Interesting. Okay, so do we have any questions here? We're ready over here. And then Bruce, thank you.
Thank you. I didn't understand many things. I think
I'm sorry.
it was too fast for me.
I'm so sorry. I do talk quickly. I
but I
apologize.
tried. My question is, usually I sleep okay, but when I fly 13 hours or 10 hours, like 26 altogether to the end of the world, I wonder, I didn't know if I will take a pill to sleep because the melatonin doesn't help. And sometimes it's uncomfortable and you cannot sleep. And what happened when I take a pill? I never took, but I want to know for real what's happening in my body if I take a sleeping pill.
So that's two separate questions. Actually, it's many questions all wrapped up into one. So taking a sleeping pill is interesting because your body thinks it's asleep, but none of the stuff that we talked about actually happens, right? So you may feel like you slept, but again, you have to separate sleeping from all of the fantastic benefits that are associated with it, right? So for the best example is Michael Jackson, right? He put himself to sleep with an IV infusion of propofol every night. He had general anesthesia every night, and we call anesthesia sleep, but it's not, right? So he was lying down and comatose, but all of the things we talked about not happening. So any sort of drug per se, and usually we give people benzodiazepines or Valium, that sort of thing, a variety of other ones to help people sleep. It's not real sleep. So the question is how do you reset your system? Resetting that is going to be different from this. And what I will tell you, and this is really cool, it takes you into the science of energy medicine, which is a whole nother smattering of energy. I have this fantastic little gizmo called an iHealth, it's a Me Health. My Health. But it's MI Health. And with using energy patterns, you can reset your circadian rhythm. So when I travel with this little gizmo gadget, I put the time that I'm transitioning to, and it changes your energy levels so that when you wake up and wherever you are, you're on that time zone. It's really hard to do it biochemically, but you can do it with energy.
That's great. Okay, we have a question here, Bruce.
Thank you. Just one thing that really interesting about the circadian rhythm. Growing up, all my Catholic friends told me about the circadian rhythm method, which meant that if you had sex at night, you couldn't get pregnant. So I thought that was really interesting.
And how many children do they have?
A question about, I use a Whoop device to track my sleep. And I wonder if there are ways that you could suggest that would help your REM sleep, your deep sleep, and so forth to increase those. I know that's really beneficial to have those higher than average.
Right. So no one has gone as far as being able to track the levels of all of these things and how they associate with the stages of sleep. That we haven't gotten to that science yet. The only thing I would tell you is that the stronger the feedback loops And the more they oscillate, or like the better magnitude of the oscillation will increase all of the stages. So you'll have better REM, for example, if you like have higher ROR alpha, for example. Like I can't give you a pattern to say, take this for that. On the other hand, it's absolutely been demonstrated that if you don't have the feedback loops, none of those things exist, right?
Okay, great. And just one quick thing, on melatonin. I read a couple of different places that there aren't many long-term studies on that, and it's kind of questionable as whether you should take that on a long-term basis. I wonder if you have a thought on that.
So melatonin is incredibly interesting because when you are young, obviously it helps put you to sleep, but it does a myriad of things around the body that are extremely beneficial. I went to a talk maybe 2-3 years ago, and there was a guy saying that you needed 200 milligrams of melatonin a day, which seemed a little bit over the top. Actually, I think it was at RadFest. So I spent a lot of time looking into it, and it is an extremely beneficial molecule. If you take it when you are young, you destroy your negative feedback loop, so you're not making it endogenously. If you are older, meaning 50, 60, et cetera, you can absolutely supplement it because your feedback loops are sort of shot to start with. But I would max out at 20 milligrams because any more than that, you're going to have long-term damage.
Great, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we have another question here, Audrey.
Thank you. Oh, I really enjoyed hearing you today.
Oh, my pleasure. Oh, so I have to tell you that someone asked me if I was singing today, and I said, oh God, no. So I'm glad you're here.
She distracted me now. I lost my train of thought.
I'm so sorry.
I'm singing tomorrow night.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So this is connected with the time you go to sleep, right? That's important.
So everyone is going to have an internal clock whereby, like, not everyone's going to go to sleep at 8 or 9 or 10, right? Everyone's going to have their own set of hours that is appropriate for them, right?
Yeah.
You're not going to like have issues if you move it by an hour or
Right.
two. The real issues come is when you're working all night, or let's say you're working for a week at night and then you're working for another week during the day, and you're just constantly changing and you're like off kilter, right? So if you are going against your natural rhythms, what your body wants you to do, that's when you get into trouble.
Yeah. So thank you. So I've experienced, as a dissatisfied teenager, I started going to bed at 3 or 4 in the morning, and that's when I started fucking up my circadian rhythms. Recently, and over the past few years, I've been focusing on getting better with just that consistency that you're talking about. So I have had a couple of like times, but it feels almost like magic where my body's just like, yes, I'm ready. I go to bed, it's like 9:30. It feels so right, and then I also lose weight when it happens a few days in a row. I had that experience just recently, but then the habits or something kick back in, and then I want to go to 10, 11, and it just doesn't feel as good. Like it just doesn't feel as good, but somehow it's been hard for me to. So would you suggest, like, is there a supplement, one of the particular ones that you mentioned? The butcher's broom is one I'm going to definitely get. And I take I take some different things that I've learned about here, like for the depth of my sleep. I get amazing sleep. I use the sleep patch. It's amazing for REM sleep. Definitely makes a difference when I don't use it. But yeah, I just want to work on like retraining my body and, to that healthy cycle of.
So you're going to hate this suggestion. So I have to get up at 5:30 every day for work, right? I hate it. But what I will tell you is that if you get up consistently at the same time every day, by 9:30, you're exhausted, right? If you don't have to get up in the morning, your body's like, right? And then you're going to go to sleep and you go, and then it just keeps moving. So if you force yourself to get up at some ridiculous time for you, maybe 7 is ridiculous, I don't know. Like at 5:30 I can do consistently. When I get to 4:30 to catch a plane or something, then I go, But it forces me, so by the time, like I take my melatonin at 8:30 every night, by 9:30 I can't keep my eyes open. I sleep all night long, and then boof, 5 minutes before my alarm goes off, I'm there. So you have to find some point. It's just going to like keep you on track, even if it's like agonal.
Thank you. I thought about doing that, and I've not always succeeded, so you gave me that answer.
The
so.
key is to put the alarm clock like on the other side of the room. And I've even seen one that's on this little robot that moves around. And so when you get up to turn it off, it moves. Have you seen that? It's amazing.
Yeah, I was gonna say I've seen that when it's like a little go-kart that moves around until you go and smack it.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a question on this side. Dimitri?
Two questions. If you could remind us exactly what the half-life or something is, that would be great, because I've heard that explanation before, but it escaped me. Second question, NAD. So there's all these different options, patches, injections, IVs, and then there's the treatments all at once. And what is your opinion on saturating our bodies with NAD? How do we do this? What medium and how much and how frequent and so on?
Sure. So half-life is exactly what it sounds like. If your body has X number of milligrams, right, what is the time so that you have half of it? It's a half-life. So let's say you had 10 milligrams of something at hour A, like let's say 1 o'clock, right? Let's say 5 o'clock, there's half of it. That time is half of it, right? And then if you repeat that time again, you're at half of that, right? So it's not gone, it's just literally the half-life. And the reason we do that, at least in the world of anesthesia, is because it's just to do with pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics. So you know when to redose something. So if you know the half-life is 3 hours and you want to keep a blood volume here, you go, aha, 3 hours, I have to increase it. Right? If you wait till you hit the ground zero and you redose it again, then you've got these big dips versus sort of more of a less of an oscillatory, so that's half-life. The NAD question is going to be way more interesting because Steve's going to tell me that I'm wrong, because we have this argument all the time. So as you know, we are NAD depleted by the time we're 40, roughly. Everyone, everyone's different. There's a bell-shaped curve because life is a bell-shaped curve. But you're going to be deficient at a certain point. Why? Because you use it for DNA repair mechanisms and you have more DNA damage as you get older, right? You have 10 to the 5th DNA errors per cell per day, and you have to use it to fix it, and you can't fix it as much, blah, 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 blah. So your need for it goes up, and your ability to salvage it goes down, so you just have less. So obviously, you're right, you need more. How do you get it? NAD directly has to be either IV or IM, right? If you take it orally, it has to be a precursor, so there's NR or there's NMN. What Steve will tell you shortly is that there's a way to short circuit that by decreasing the enzyme that breaks it down so that you have more in your body intrinsically. I don't completely agree with that, but again, everyone's going to tell you something different. I am a firm believer. What I do is I rotate between NMN orally and an IM injection. There's a company out of the UK that's a fantastic NAD home IM kit. It's a couple $100 and they send you a vial with 1,000 little syringes, and every day you give yourself a pre-measured dose. They'll sort of boost you up. It's a little pricey, so I'll do that for a month and then do orals for a month and then go back. But I'm staunchly opposed to the IVs because I think it's really terrible to have this huge monster dose and then like nothing. It just, that's not physiologic in any way, at all.
What about the injection?
So IM injections are fine. So it depends on your volume of distribution. This is pharmacology. So it depends on how deficient you are, what tissue you inject it in, right? If you inject into something that's more vascular, it's going to spread more quickly. If you inject into a big ball of fat, it's just going to sit there. So it depends on the length of your needle, right? IM is going to be different than sub-Q. So it just, there's too many variables, so I don't want to spew something out.
How do you prefer taking it?
I use a sub-Q needle usually when I do my injections. IM hurts. So I just use sub-Q once a month, and then I'll do oral and then sub-Q. And I travel a lot, so when I travel, I do oral. When I'm not, it sits in my refrigerator and I do an IM.
Okay, great. Deb, you have a question?
Thank you. Thanks for coming to be with us again and
Oh,
putting
pleasure.
something special together. That's great. And forgive me if I missed this, but my question is there, so we measure our sleep activity with apps and watches and that sort of thing. Is there a way other than an EEG to measure the magnitude of from the hyperpolarization to depolarization to know if we're actually in a good zone?
I wish we did, but no. I mean, unless you want to pay, you're right, $1 zillion to go to a sleep lab.
Okay.
No,
yeah.
not really.
Isn't that a drag? We need to invent one.
But I mean, but you can sort of tell, right?
Okay.
Right? You know on the days where your depth is just, and I don't wear an Oura ring. That would stress me out far too much. Be like, oh my God, I'm being monitored. Am I sleeping well? Like, right?
Yeah.
But some days, you know, right? I mean, it's just like, that's just, I mean, I've gone to places where men sit there in the morning and they like compare their sleep stuff, and they're competitive about how well they sleep. Like, how stressful is that, right? Like, but if you go to sleep and you're happy and you have a great dream and you feel great and you wake up and you're refreshed, like, spot on, right? That's good. Versus like you're tossing, you're turning, you're miserable, you can't get to sleep, you're obsessing about something at 3 in the morning. Clearly, maybe you need a little bit of help. So I wish that there were a good test, but there isn't.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, great. And then we have time for two more questions on here. Sohara and Jean.
Thank you, Sandra. I wanted to know about the neurocogenin. I can't pronounce.
Now you're gonna get me screwed up. Neoruscogenin.
Yeah.
That one, yes. Butcher's broom.
Where
Amazon.
is easy to get it?
Oh, it's really easy.
And what's the dosage?
That's a good question. I don't remember what the dosage is, but I will check that and get back to you. Yeah, exactly. Actually, that's not completely true. I have a firm belief that you take half what's on the bottle.
Oh.
Half.
So it's over the counter, it's not?
It's totally over the counter. And it'll get rid of your hemorrhoids.
And what?
I said, and it will get rid of any hemorrhoids.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Sorry, and inserting this question that what we're talking about here, isn't it true for when you start most supplements that really you should start at half and then work your way up? Because even what the bottle says, just
Oh,
again,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. For 2 reasons, actually for 3 reasons. Number one, whoever creates the dose on a box, it's a guess. I will tell you that what happens is you do experiments in rats, usually it's rats, and there's this ridiculously complex formula to guess what happens in humans. It's a guess. And I'll tell you that the standard deviation is huge, right? And then one company goes, it's 50 milligrams. So then every other company goes, I'm 55, I'm better, right? It's a guessing game. So A, no one knows for sure. B, everybody's different, right? I come from the world of pediatric anesthesia, a 10-kilo kid is different than a 140-kilo kid. I'm not gonna give them the same drug. Same thing here, a 40-kilo lady is different than a 300-pound dude, right? And everyone's kidney function and liver function is different, so you always start low. Thirdly, all of the things that we take, and I take 70 agents a day, including 10 drugs, are synergistic, right? So I don't need a full dose of anything because it's all working together to create a program. So I can get rid of relative risk of side effects while increasing the synergistic activity by taking way smaller doses. So that's why I take half doses or smaller of everything that I take.
That's very important information. It means that you have to really be in touch with yourself, be testing, checking data, and Okay, question from Jean.
Just briefly, because you mentioned this earlier before, if you can just give a little synopsis of exosomes? and the
Yes, I'm
different-
glad you asked that. Okay, so exosomes. Anyone here, does anyone have, you guys are pretty educated, right? Exosomes? Not totally. Okay, so I'll give you my 2-minute elevator speech on exosomes. So exosomes are vesicles. They're little lipid bowls that get excreted from cells, and they contain information that go from one cell to another cell, okay? The information in the cell, which we call the cargo, depends on the cell from which it came from, all right? So all cells exude exosomes, and they're called EVs, extracellular vesicles, and there's 3 different sizes roughly, and exosomes just happen to be like a middle size. It's sort of irrelevant, but it's an EV. And so the cell that it comes from will dictate what's in it, right? And the reason I say that is you can get engineered exosomes or by someone in a lab who's put something in an exosome, usually chemotherapy or some sort of antiviral something, and direct it to a part of your body. So just so know that engineered exosomes are different than endogenous exosomes, and that's what we're talking about here. So what cell is it coming from? If you look at on the market for exosomes, you want to know where it comes from because it can come from fetal tissue or adult tissue. The ones out there, and I've read through all of these, if you get them from adult tissue, usually it's adipose adult tissue. So if you think about that, what kind of signals or cargo is going to be in that exosome? It's going to be old people stuff, and it's coming from fat tissue. Those are cytokinins and information that your cells don't need, right? You want very youthful information. So we get them from perifetal tissues, and your choices are amniotic, cord, or placental, right? We don't chop up babies, as I like to say. We should, but we don't. And they each have like little bits of difference, right? Amniotic is also going to have some adult exosomes and some baby exosomes, as well as sort of, a mishmash soup of cytokinins and hyaluronic acid and all that sort of thing. Cord is going to have, it's Morton's jelly, so it's going to have a lot of thick hyaluronic acid. So if you want to inject it into like a place and you want it to stay there, that's a good choice. But generally what I do for myself and for most people are placental. So it's the chorionic layer of the placental, and we obviously choose the mesenchymal stem cells. And they usually come with 250 plus or minus different pieces in the cargo. So they're cytokinins, they're chemokinins, they're non-coding RNA, whiff of DNA, but not that much, and they have regenerative instructions. So when you inject the exosomes, they go to pieces and parts of your body to a cell, and they give you instructions to be more baby-like. So you're going to regenerate tissue, you're going to be healthier, you're going to regrowth, regenerate, all those wonderful things. So I'm a huge proponent of exosomes over stem cells as an example, because we're not injecting people's DNA into you, and they're not cells, they're cell products. Cells have surface markers that are extremely inflammatory and potentially immunogenic. So how frequently do you do exosomes and where can you put them? The answer is anytime you want, anywhere you want. We inject them into faces. We did some of that today. You can use them as eye drops. They'll make your vision better. You can stick them up your nose, and assuming you don't have a cold or you're full of gunk, they will go into your brain and make you smarter. You can stick them in your vein, and they will go anywhere in your body. They get attracted to areas of inflammation, and they will make you better. I've done this now for hundreds and hundreds of people. No one has ever had a side effect, and people just feel significantly better. How frequently you can do them? If you really wanted to and you had unlimited wealth, you could do it every day. I do mine every month, so I'll take a small aliquot. Again, you want to be as homeostatic as possible. Some people do monster quantities less frequently. I do smaller quantities more frequently. Because of this, we created, Steve and I, and he's going to talk after me, wherever he is, we created something called Club Exosome in Vegas to make this available for people so they can fly in on a quarterly basis, and we can inject them in your face, here, there, wherever the heck you want them, because they're very hard to get unless you're in the longevity community. They're ridiculously expensive, and people are just afraid to give them out because they're not FDA approved for anything. So when we create a club, we can sort of do it because you're not patients, you're a community, and you sign consents and blah, 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 blah. Anyway, we brought that here for you guys today. Some people did it. A lot of people didn't, but that's totally cool. But if you want it the next time, we're happy to do it for you, and I'll answer any exosome questions.
Yeah. Okay. Couple other things I'll finish up with. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for setting up this club thing. It's fantastic. So first of all, on the metformin, one other question. There's a lot of controversy now between metformin and berberine. Do you have any thoughts on that? Because I know you study all these things pretty well.
Sure.
So what's your feedback on?
So the best study I have read, which was, I want to say, a year or two ago, demonstrated the combination of both is the way to go.
Combination of both.
Which I love because it supports
Again, low dose.
Well, it supports my idea that small doses and combinations of things are synergistic. So they recommend that 500 of metformin and 500 of berberine offset by 6 to 8 hours is more beneficial than either of them independently at higher doses.
Oh, wow. So so we say offset. Don't take them at the same time, you're saying?
Right.
So take say metformin in the morning and maybe more berberine at night?
Yeah.
Okay, 8 hours
or flip it. Right,
or
so we talk about the half-life. The half-life is about 4 to 6 hours, so if you do it by 8 hours, one is pretty much gone, 70–80% gone, and then you use the other one. So they mechanistically have the same benefits, but their side effects are different. So you've reduced relative risk while increasing gain.
Got it. Okay. Is there an issue around, because this is something that's coming out pretty strong on metformin, more and more, I don't know how much proven it is, but is there an issue around muscle loss with metformin?
So because metformin is an AMP kinase activator, by definition, it is an mTOR blocker, right? Muscle needs mTOR to grow, right? Which is why I'm not a huge fan of rapamycin, because it is an absolute mTOR blocker.
Oh, okay.
Right? So, and I know they don't take it every day, you take it like this whole dosing strategy. But any cells that turn over quickly require mTOR. So hippocampal in your brain, muscle, gut lining, thank you, that's a big one. So people that are on rapamycin for real stuff have all of these issues. So I'm not a big fan. But small doses of metformin, you're going to reduce relative risk, because 500 milligrams is not a lot at all. When I was taking 2,000 milligrams a day, I could feel a difference. My muscles weren't growing. It was far too much. So I came off for a long time, read the study on the 500 split, and I'm like, you know what, that's what I'm going to do. And that seems to be working. And I'm not short of muscle at the moment.
Okay. So on sleep, I've gathered now from your whole presentation, just to, as a, I'm obviously, and you spoke on this. I was a little bit busy in the beginning having to answer some texts, I'm sorry, but I gathered that, well, sleep can be disrupted by age, of course, by traumas, by, crises in your life. So I assume that what you're saying, or gather what you're saying as far as taking these different supplements / drugs, that if you take them in concert with each other and low dosing, you can get, no matter it's from crisis or from age, you can balance that sleep out. You've had this big success in it, but obviously you have to do the whole plethora of supplements. Is that what you're saying?
Right, so
clearly.
So the idea is that sleep is not so easy. You close your eyes and you fall asleep. And that has historically just been what everyone thought. And the point of my presentation is that it is an amazingly complex orchestra of different proteins at different times, turning on, turning off, short half-lives. It is just an absolutely beautiful symphony. And if you choose one thing to fix, the rest are still screwed up. When we are young and everything's working perfectly, it's amazing. A teenager sleeps for 12 hours, right? If you have a traumatic event in your life, I can't, that's a whole nother issue, right? Because you've got, all these neurotransmitters and everything else sort of interfering. But in the perfect world, as you get older and all of these things fail in concerts, you have to fix them, but you have to fix them in a synergistic method. So it falls into a little bit of all of them to help versus destroying the balance.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Fantastic.
pleasure.
Good job.
Okay, so now we're gonna hear from the second person on Club at Sosome, Stephen McCain. He's also here, and he is, just so that for those of you that don't remember him, he is a twice Olympic gymnast, world champion silver medalist, Hall of Fame inductee. He is a speaker, educator, entrepreneur, and coach to some of the top performers in the world, including actors, stuntmen, cirque performers, athletes, and executives. Stephen has a passion for human optimization and performance, increasing health span, and helping others achieving their goals with health. At 50, Stephen believes it's possible to redefine the limitations of age. Please help me welcome Stephen McCain.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. This is awesome. Thank you. Really appreciate it. I'm certain I'm going to be holding this upside down, but we'll figure it out. I have to say, what an amazing presentation by Dr. Sandy. I mean, how lucky are we? I'm always blown away by this. It's like a freight train of cognitive fortitude. Just, at some point it just breaks you down and you're like, oh my God, she's absolutely right. Like we're in uncharted territory with our sleep. So I'm going to have to go over that presentation quite a bit. I just want to say that I love this group. I love this organization. The smiles, the fact that everyone seems to be somehow tricking this aging process. Every time I meet somebody and I hear their age, I'm always like, wow, this is fantastic. So I just want to applaud you and let you know that as somebody on the outside, I see results and I see a commitment, and it's really inspiring for me, and it's humbling because to be up here getting to share my story, which you know, when I started my journey, and I guess I'll tell you what I'm going to talk about today. So I just want to share with you how I got into this 15 years ago. Mine will be a little bit more story-driven, a little less science, so it'll be a nice departure from the science. And, you know, hopefully it will give you a little bit of a practical framework on how I view longevity, something to hang your hat on. Because let's face it, you can get all this information, but when the rubber meets the road and you got to start putting pills in your mouth and injecting you and doing all this stuff and preparing for sleep and all that, it gets rough, right? I mean, that's when it's all of a sudden it falls apart and you're like, oh, what was that again? So I always like to say, like, have a framework that you can put everything in its right bucket. So hopefully this will go well. So in order to tell you about my longevity journey, I have to go back to a time when I used to be one of the best gymnasts in the world. I two-time Olympian, Hall of Fame inductee, got to compete on every continent except for Antarctica. And I was in film, television, commercial. I performed in the Biennale in Venice, Italy for a whole summer in a museum. It was just I was a Calvin Klein underwear model at one point, believe it or not. It sounds funny saying that now, but oh, that was Adriana Lima, Victoria's Secret's model. Got to do that show as well. Just so you kind of get an idea of what I did in my sport, I wanted to play a video for you just to, you know, kind of give you an example of what I did. So
this is one of Steve's best potential events, but when you are doing new coach gymnastics and it's hard stuff, it's very difficult combinations like this right here. He'll go into his second release. Fingertips got that one. A couple years ago, he would be almost done, but nowhere near now. Hiked Kovacs. Steve McCain came into this competition a legitimate contender to win the national title. It is a title every gymnast that grows up in the United States, they go to bed thinking about winning.
It's awesome to still get applause from something that happened so long ago, you know. And I mean, when I look at it now, I go, geez, what the heck? How did I get to that state? I mean, my goodness, you got to be crazy to commit to something like that. But it's kind of who I am, and you know, that's how I got into longevity. I retired from gymnastics, and of all the things I did in gymnastics, and I pushed myself so hard that at one point my body rejected. I would go on the equipment and it wouldn't let me. My body basically said, I'm done. And I'll never forget, I laid in an MRI machine for the third time in a little over a year, right before my last Olympic push. I was getting close to 30 years old. And I remember laying there like this. It was a wrist injury. And I thought to myself, maybe this is a disease. You know, maybe this gymnastics thing isn't really, you know, I'm not supposed to take it this seriously like this. And I said, no, I'm retiring. I'm not quitting. And I literally told my body, I said, you need to get your shit together. We are finishing this. I'm not quitting. We're going to do this whether you like it or not. There is an entire quantum field of medicine that we are totally unaware of that resides right here. And one day Sandra is going to unpack that for us. But until we get that, just know this. It all starts in the mind, right? It really does. And this was basically my rock bottom. I retired. It was a massive rug pull on my life. All my discipline went away. I slept whenever I wanted. I woke up every single day with a hangover. I started smoking cigarettes. I ate whatever the hell I wanted, fast food. And I thought, I could live off the interest for the rest of my life. I've been working out 6 days a week since I was 10 years old. You know, and let me tell you something. You cannot live off the interest. It goes quick. And so I had a moment. I came home one night. I passed out from drinking. I woke up to my fiance at the time, who I no longer am with, shaking me I was paralyzed. I was puking all over myself. And I had this out-of-body experience. I literally like pulled back from the moment. And I was sober in my mind, crystal clear. And I thought, I'm killing myself. I'm killing myself. These choices I'm making are going to put me in the grave. And I woke up the next day, and I stopped drinking. Haven't touched alcohol in 15 years. And I decided that, okay, well, I don't want to just live. I want to feel like a superhero again. I want to be a badass. I want to feel like I did when I was a gymnast, like that guy swinging around on high bar. That's the way I want to live my life. That's the standard I want to set for myself. And so I got to work. First thing I did, I went back to the thing I know best, exercise. The best medicine in the world. The one thing that positively affects every tenet of aging, according to Sandra Kaufmann. And the better shape you're in, the more you're able to actually charge those channels. So it's a positive feedback loop. Started studying courses with sports medicine, certifications, and understanding how the body worked, how to train it metabolically, strength-wise. I overhauled my diet. I basically tested my blood on every diet there was to personalize it for myself. Looking at, various testing, supplements as well. And all of this is my supplement cabinet. That's one half of it. Sandy's been in it before, and we've gone through some of it. But this was, based a large part on Sandra's books. I've been doing that for years. I kind of defer to her for a lot of my decision-making on taking these supplements and really making sense of all of this stuff. I got into biohacking gear. When I started before the biohacking movement really, I think, took off. And when I started using some of these devices, I mean, if you think about it, if you are bound to Earth, you're affected by heat, cold, energy, light, and what's the other one? What am I missing? Talk about sleep deprived. I just came back from Houston where we lost power for two days. But, and oxygen, right? So started trying to not only create protocols, but then how could I use these different things that would affect my physiology to maximize these protocols and get a larger return on my investment of time and energy. Got into testing my body. You can see nobody uses 23andMe anymore, I don't think. Not unless you're not a part of this community, right? But, testing myself, my sleep, my metabolism, DEXA scan, my gut, my brain, lots of blood labs. Really trying to wrap my head around physiology of my body. And then I found this book. Now, I don't recommend you go out and read this book. It's a little outdated now. But what it did is it opened me up to what functional medicine is. What is integrative medicine? And how they go after treating the root cause as opposed to just treating the symptom, right? And this really got me saying, I need to work with a really good doctor. I want a functional medicine doctor. I found myself a functional medicine, anti-aging doctor, and we started uncovering what I call my bottleneck. And my bottleneck, the picture on the right is how I looked, but this is my cholesterol panel. If you look at my LDL particle count, it's almost right at very high. If you look at the size of it, it's high. And then if you look at the LP, lipoprotein phospholipase 2, that is an enzyme that gets elevated when you have arterial inflammation. So that's a sign of atherosclerosis forming. And this scared the living hell out of me. I was like, Jesus, I was on one of those ketogenic diets. I was doing the Dave Asprey diet at the time. The danger coffee is dangerous if you're not careful. My physiology, nutrition is so weird. People fall into camps and they become so evangelistic. You become this evangelist of a certain thing. Oh, it's a ketogenic, or oh this or oh that. And it's like, just test your physiology and figure it out. But most importantly, you need to know, in my opinion, what your bottlenecks are. And that's going to be, what did all of your gene line die from before you? Right? You need to know that stuff. and you need to start making a plan now. We don't want to wait till we get pre-disease or disease and then start going, well, now I gotta do something about this. So it's really, taught me that there's kind of an order of operations in this framework that we have to do. And then I read this other book. This guy was called himself Dr. X. He wasn't a doctor, but he was in Europe, and he kept talking about peptides. And I was like, what is, and nobody was talking about peptides. This was 10 years ago. And I kept going like, what are these things? And so I got into them, and he was also really good with a bunch of other stuff and supplements. But it started this journey down a peptide rabbit hole where I started going to conferences where I was the only guy in the room who wasn't a doctor. And now, funny enough, that conference is happening June 15th in Vegas, and I'm the host and a keynote speaker there. Yeah. So it's kind of neat. I took the doctor's courses. I was in his office hours where it was only physicians, and I'd be asking questions, and he'd be like, that's a great question. Who is that? And I was like kind of chuckling because, probably wasn't supposed to be on that call. But anyways, so that kind of got me, after this, being a world-class athlete, being out of shape, washed up, alcoholic, to at 44, I felt like I had done it. I became that superhero I wanted to become. I rebuilt myself. I engineered this protocol to somehow defeat this thing of aging and regain what I had worked so hard to have in the past. And then this happened. Ugh, the worst injury in the world. Has anyone ever torn their Achilles in this room? Is it the worst injury in the world? Terrible, right? It's crippling. My therapist that I was seeing because of this was like, Steve, you got to take it easy on yourself. They call it the Achilles tendon because it's withstood thousands of years, right? And you imagine these warriors and that were decimated after they tore their Achilles. That's it, no matter how great you were. And I was working on a Nike commercial, and great shape, starting to feel good. I was working with a 2-time Oscar-winning director. He did The Birdman and The Revenant, Alejandro Gonzalez Iñárritu, and they whispered into my ear and said, hey, can you come back tomorrow? We want you to do a whole nother day of shooting. And I was like, oh, this is great, man. I'm back, And I'm in my 40s, mid-40s, and I'm doing gymnastics for a Nike commercial. And the ground wasn't really that safe, and I was just about to tell them, I think we should stop. And I held my tongue, and I ended up tearing my Achilles, and I was furious. I mean, I have to be honest. I was absolutely furious. But I'll tell you what this thing taught me. I had been head down for a long time trying to learn, and I never felt like I owned the knowledge. I was always borrowing it from these people, these doctors, these experts, these scientists. This injury is when I said, I'm doing this. This is my time. I'm taking over. I know how to do this. I own this. I know how to do it. Called up my anti-aging doctor. I said, I want to go on growth hormone. I want maximum healing capacity. Got home from surgery, injected right above my Achilles with some peptides, healing peptides. They're known to rebuild and help rebuild tendons. Took a bunch of essential amino acids because I was basically rescaffolding that tendon. Blood flow restriction training. I threw the kitchen sink at it. And I did all my recovery where Kobe Bryant, Conor McGregor, like all the best go. And in 5 months, I was running, and the record was 6 months. And I got back on top of that mountain again. And it was a big learning lesson for me because it really taught me that, you're always going to be in a state of learning. There's always going to be a Sandra Kaufmann who's going to drop a nugget on you, and you're going to be like, oh, this is a paradigm shift, right? But you own what you know, and the more you can take ownership of your health, the more I believe you come into every single lecture you watch, every single speech you hear, every podcast you listen to, you come at it with a different mindset. You come at it from a place where you're meeting them halfway. Not just sitting on the sidelines like a critic. Well, I guess that's pretty good. And where you don't really partake as much. You're just kind of gathering some information and kicking the tires, so to speak, right? So, that's great, Steve. What does it have to do with my longevity, right? Does everyone know who that is? Is Brian Johnson? Yeah, so he's a very interesting guy, right? You know, super interesting. It's funny, I've told Jean this earlier today. She says, you should mention this. And I said, I see him, and I totally respect what he's doing. It's kind of like an Olympian's approach. It's very structured. He's got a lot of resources to throw at, and you can tell he's got incredible discipline. Reminds me of that 4-5 year into it where I was trying to be perfect. Perfect. It's gonna be perfect, you know? And let me tell you, you're never gonna be perfect. Never. There's no such thing. It is foolish to even try that. Instead, you're just pruning. Pruning. Again, Sandra drops this thing, great. I'm gonna add those in. Prune, 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 right? And you just keep moving. You are a moving target. Some things you'll do your entire life, probably for the rest of your life. They're just things that are just indigenous to being alive. There's some things that as you age, you're going to start moving into a different cycle of your life, and you're going to need to start implementing some new things, right? So I'm going to just say, this is how I view longevity in a way. In its most simplest form, if I just stripped everything away. Step number 1, you've got to mitigate disease, right? People get really clever sometimes, like, oh, I reduced my metabolic age by 10, 12, 15 years. Really? Did you reduce your plaque in your arteries by 10, 15 years? Right? Think about that for a second. Who cares if you can live to be 180 if that unchecked plaque buildup is going to give you a stroke at 85? Who cares? You got to take care of this side of the longevity framework first. You need to know how your family members and everyone before you didn't make it. And you got to have some sort of mitigation strategy in place. If it's cancer, you better start screening now. You know, if it's cardiovascular, you need to start looking under the hood. You've got to have a plan, right? Peter Attia is really good for this stuff, in my opinion. You know, his latest stuff, I think, really covers a lot of that ground. Then the second thing is, let's increase the health span, right? This is your sleep, your nutrition, your exercise, your stress management. How much utility can I get out of this body? Can I be a 90-year-old and still have complete, full mobility? Can I have that, right? And then the fun part is the age reversal. Is it possible? What can we do, right? Like, what's out there? What's coming? What sort of things what paradigm shifts are we finding that we can really sort of rebuild regenerate the structures of our body. So, I mean, this is kind of not really much that important, but I tend to think of, you have full body enhancement. Well, NAD does quite a bit of stuff, right? You need it to power the cells to repair, genes. You need it to make cellular energy. Anything that increases blood flow, well, that's a full body enhancement. You're going to get more blood flow and oxygen to every organ in your body, right? So sometimes I think, okay, is this a operating system enhancement? Then you have your systems management. This would be like your endocrine system. Hormones, right? They start to decline. You start on broadband, and then as you get older, you start moving to dial-up, right? This communication network starts to break down, So we have to kind of look at it from a systems perspective. Then you have your organ health. So it could be your heart, your eyes, your liver, whatever it is. Sometimes you got to keep an eye on, again, maybe something that tends to show up in your family line. And then you have the cell. And the cell is where all the aging research is happening right now, because really at the end of the day, that's how we truly understand how we age. So what sort of tools do you have at your disposal? Well, from the behavioral aspects, because we can, again, it's not just taking a pill to change our cellular behavior. You can do it with behaviors, right? If I exercise, I can change things that are going on in my cells. So your sleep, your nutrition, your exercise, your stress management. You gotta have a plan and a framework for this stuff. This is your health span. You just can't get away from these things, in my opinion. Maybe at someday, thank you. I mean, I'll be honest with you, at 50 years old and feeling the way I do, I will say that really managing this part is where I really, my discipline comes into play. And I really think it breeds consistency. It really does. What do we got here? Oh, then you got the hallmarks of aging. Or you got Sandra Kaufmann's 7 Tenets of Aging, right? So now, this is where you got to start taking a deep dive, and you got to roll up your sleeves, and you got to get into the cell, right? This is where we all struggle to learn biochemistry. We sit there and we see all these things that Sandra puts up there. If you take a little bit of time to learn some of these ways that we age, and what I do is I just pull up AI Assistant, and I'll just, anytime I come across anything I don't understand, I'll ask AI. Sometimes I'll ask AI, hey, create me a really quick course on biochemistry. Get me up to speed on this particular thing. They'll do it. You know, so it really kind of helps to get the most out of someone's lectures, like Sandra's, if you can start to understand these cellular pathways through which we age. And then you've got your tools, right? So we have a longevity framework, get your disease, health span, then age reversal. Then we've got our behaviors, that's our health span. Now we have our tools. What do we have at our disposal that are external? Testing. Start looking under the hood, start learning your physiology. Artificial intelligence is really beefing up in terms of diagnostics and wearables. Very interesting stuff. Supplements, medications, hormones, peptides, bioregulating peptides, stem cells, exosomes, gene therapy, biohacking gear, plasma exchange. We're you know, go to RadFest if you want to learn all these things, right? But, you know, but this is like your arsenal, right? You know what I mean? And then finally, if you want to follow me, I have a podcast, and these are, if you want to take a picture of this, you can all reach out to me. I'm happy to share any information that I've come across or that I know. And then, see if I have anything else. That's it, questions. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Stephen. That was beautiful. I heard you in breakfast, but hearing you now, yeah, I can feel like how you progress into this longevity journey. And you know, as we take the questions from the audience and also online, I want to remind you, you can send your questions in the chat as well. I want to ask you how you briefly mentioned about your mindset, and then going from like this goal, you know, this medalist gymnast into somebody for longevity for the long term. How do you did the transition mindset wise, and what are you doing for yourself now in regards to your mindset?
Well, I think it's sort of a spontaneous thing that happens on a moment by moment basis throughout the day. I mean, I'll be honest with you. There are days I do not want to work out. I just don't. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm human, and I always tell people, I don't confront people, but I have a lot of conversations with people about exercise. I don't know if they truly appreciate what it can do for you, and I always tell people that it's a non-negotiable. And this is where I train my mind. It's like, do I brush my teeth? Do I bathe? Do I get dressed? Do I go to the bathroom instead of going to the bathroom in my pants? I know it sounds ridiculous, but there's things that you just are non-negotiable. Like I'm always like, it's in put exercise in that. Or people were like, I don't like exercise. Do you like taking out the garbage? Do you like doing chores? Do you like cleaning up? We do things that we don't like all the time, right? You don't have to like exercise. And I can tell you the reason why you probably don't is because you're a little bit out of shape. Because once you're in shape, you don't want to get out of shape because you feel better, right? So sometimes like exercise is very tangible, and I think it's very easy. We can all relate to the dread that we've felt and the negotiations with ourselves, like, I'll do it tomorrow, or maybe I'll do it. And so there's I think there's big moments in our lives. Everyone in this industry that I've talked to, I always ask them, what was your big moment? Kind of like my moment where I came home drunk. But then you have that for some people, and then you have the sort of real-time decision-making that has to happen on a moment-by-moment basis. And I think just coming to things like this and listening to people like Sandra or myself and having a community around you will help you make more positive decisions. You know what I mean? It's the community aspect cannot be underappreciated. No.
Absolutely. And then also, how is it different, like the way you approach exercise, in a more practical matter, as a gymnast versus now for living long? Because I know there is a difference, as far as how you take it. Can you speak to that?
Yes, so I'm all about exercising for longevity because here's the thing, all of your sports-specific stuff still sits on if you're human with 4 working limbs, bound to Earth's gravity, and you breathe oxygen, you're going to have to do stability, you're going to have to do strength or resistance training of some sort, and you're going to have to do some sort of metabolic conditioning. You might be like, that sounds exactly like Peter Attia. That's sports medicine. That's what you learn. These are the fundamentals. And I think what you can do is you can do the minimum effective dose of each one of those. You don't have to kill yourself. I think what people don't understand about exercise is it's an adaptation. It's climbing a set of stairs, and you can only do it one step at a time. But most people go to the gym, and they try to jump 10 flights in one fell swoop. And I think that, I always tell people, if you took a stopwatch when I started exercising, I'm doing my strength training today. As soon as I start exercising, take a stopwatch and time it. Then when I stop, take it off. Add it up when I get done with my workout. It's 10 minutes. It's 10 minutes. It's really a lot less than you think. And the more you can borrow from authorities and structure something that leans on the science, that is well structured, it becomes very minimal and almost invisible in a way. But it still allows you to do, like, I'll just show you. So I don't do gymnastics anymore, but if I do my strength training, my metabolic fitness, and my mobility, well, that's all I need for my specific type of gymnastics, right? You know what I mean? So,
Okay, so we have a few questions in the
that's
crowd.
the only way I can keep up with Sandra. That's the only way. I was like, I got to do something.
All right, thank you, Stephen, for coming. I really enjoyed your presentation at the Rathfest. I was very touched. And you said something that stayed with me until today. You said, never be 4 days in a row without working. Yes! And that impacted me. I want to thank you for that because I got it, I got it. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll be at conferences and people will come up to me multiple times and they'll tell me, I followed everything you said at Radfest. And it turned around my physiology. I've lost weight. I've lost 30 pounds. I got my life back. And I had it's Steve's 5 rules of exercise that I originally came up with. But one of them is don't ever go 4 consecutive days in a row without exercise. Don't do it. Don't do it. I'm telling you, I've trained elite athletes. You give an elite athlete 4 days off, they come in just dragging. Everybody. We're human, right? If you stick to that, don't ever miss 4 days in a row. Just don't. You'll never fall off. Even if you just go in and just do stretch, just don't miss it, So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, that's great. Any other questions? Do you have any questions?
Don't be shy.
Don't be shy. Let's take advantage of this. Do you have any tips as to build in a routine, like an exercise routine?
Yes, I do. So on the stability side, which is really like the ability to keep your body over your center of gravity, right? And to be mobile. I've done a dynamic stretch routine where every day, every time I go, I've done this for 35 years. Start with the shoulders, here, go to the trunk, here, I move to the hips, I go a little bit in the knees, ankles, come back up, I do the hips, right? A little bit of this, hips again, come down, get my lower back, sides, each side here, I stretch my shoulders, I open my chest up, I do my torso, I do my Achilles, and there's a little bit more than that, but I say rust never sleeps. It never sleeps. Sandra will tell you, if I'm not mistaken, your muscles will glycate over time, right? You get in a straitjacket. If you're in a straitjacket and you can't move, it's because your muscles are your tissue is glycated, it's stiff. You got to break it up. Dynamic stretch. It's so easy to do, and you just memorize it. I've memorized it for 35 years. Same one I've done for 35 years, and I have zero rust. It is exactly like I did it the first time. Look, how do you define aging? It is the gradual loss of function of an organism over time. If you cannot move, that is a loss of function, that is a biomarker for aging, in my opinion. Right? No. Just start with that basic dynamic stretch routine, right? You will not dumb down the neural drive. We're not talking flexibility. We're not pushing. Just do a nice basic one that gets your shoulders, your torso, your hips, your lower back, and then your shoulder stretching, and then open up a little transverse plane and your Achilles, and you're ready to go.
She's asking if you can do this again for those that are online. She doesn't have a
Oh,
microphone.
okay, like
with
standing
a little
right here?
bit of less.
The whole thing?
Here.
So could you do the same thing, a little less range, because I'm kind of videotaping them for everybody.
Yeah.
Little less range of motion for people that aren't as flexible. And that would be really good because most of us can do it.
Okay, great. All right. And okay, perfect. So I always start with getting the shoulders moving. You know, shoulders moving, right? Shoulders moving. And this is like pulling, you're like a ninja or something. You're pulling swords out, right? Then this kind of, and even a little bit of cross, you know, just getting some heat into the tissue. I like to also put a bunch of sweats on. Sometimes I'll put even gloves and a little hat on, trap heat, to warm the tissue up. All right, stretch over here, torso. That's the torso. And I just start moving those hips around, getting this rust out, right? Get the rust out. Both here. You can even do it with your knees, too. You can just be like here, just kind of get these things, get the pops out, right? Then just kind of squat down a little bit. Try to straighten your legs a little bit if you know, as much as you can, you know? And every time you do it, it'll just get a little bit easier and easier. You'll be like, okay. We're just taking like a rubber band and we're just stretching it out, right? And then if you can straddle a little bit, most people are like this. So what you want to try to do is just kind of try to flatten your back out a little bit. You know, if you get you can even kind of stretch a little this way. And then as you get better and better, just let gravity sort of work its way to where you can start just hanging a little bit. Then once you're hanging, you can kind of move through your hips even a little more, and you're rotating the stretch across the 4 different hamstrings, right? Same thing with here. You can just be like even bent knees a little bit. You're just trying to push it open. Come to the ground. You guys into this still? Okay. I like to do what we call I always had Russian coaches. This is the babushka, stands for butterfly, not to be confused with babushka, which is grandma. So, and then here so this is kind of just still, you're always moving. But here I try to just see if I can get a little bit, still again with a flat back, and you just keep moving. We're not testing our flexibility. We're just kind of moving. We're just moving and stretching. Then I'll kind of put my arms behind me, get my shoulders a little bit. I'll take one shoulder. This is a little advanced, actually. A lot of people don't realize your shoulders rotate. This is like saved my shoulders, but we can kind of leave that just like this. You just here, right? And then if you want to, you can start moving into a little bit of this, where you can just side to side, if you can sit like this, a little bit. I mean, for me, it's like eventually I can still all the way, and then I do this still. You don't have to do this. This could be dangerous, but I do what's called this is like very important if you ever land on your head skiing or something. You want to be able to have that, in all honesty, if you. And then I stretch my back. You can just kind of be gentle with this. You start here. If you have to pull up to here, that's fine, right? And then also always be rotating a little bit down, And then for your shoulders, if your shoulders are really tight, you can come to something like a device like this, and you can just here and really keep your core tight. Stretch your shoulders, because you can't lift a weight over your head if you only can go to here. You want to be able to go to here, right? So stretching those shoulders, and then finishing with some of these twisting things. Arms out like Superman, just light twisting. And then laying on your back. We've all done this one where you just bring a knee up, right? Both sides. I also like to do the wrist. Gymnasts do the wrist, but I just kind of a little bit. Again, we're just always moving. If you watch me do this in the gym, I'm always moving. And then finally, a little bit of just here, I like to bend and stretch it, and also straight leg and stretch it. If that's hard for you, just lean against the wall and do it, right? And even this stuff, if you just kind of stand and stretch a little bit, and then this, I forgot to do this during the hips, I think. But you've got to get these hips open, because a lot of people are sitting and they got this hip hinge. They don't stand like this. They stand like this. And then what they have to do to compensate is raise their back. And now they're wondering why their back is killing them. So as this gets tight, the butt turns off. So what we got to do is we got to stretch this out, stretch it out, and then strengthen the glutes a little bit, and then you'll stand up straight and be stacked. Just memorize something like that, and just keep doing it. I have a free online, if you go to StephenMcCain.com, there is a video of me doing it. Just watch it, take it to the gym with you, and mock up your own, memorize it, and just keep the rust off. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great job, great job. So so if somebody wants to then say work with you, because I know you mentioned that sometime after that, or wanted to train with you some, or maybe even just learn some of these techniques from you, how would they do that?
Yeah, well, I do have on my website. It's a free guide. I'm not selling anything. I have an entire longevity. It's called Smart Fitness Guide. If you go to Stephen
awesome.
with the P, and you can literally, it has the video of me doing the stretch. It has how to fix your shoulders from being like this, how to fix your hips from being like this, how to strength train, all broken down to its basic stuff. So
on your website.
Yeah,
Super.
StephenMcCain.com with a PH.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.